Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, the Center of the World, Part 2, Family. We've been talking about the things that comprise the foundational core of what we value most in the world, and the things that help us to find our sense of meaning in this life. Last week we talked about the importance of community, and about how we are all fundamentally social creatures that need to feel like we have a place where we can belong within a larger community that surrounds us in order for us to feel connected and grounded in our lives. For the most part, communities are built primarily on families. So this week, we're going to talk about our need to be part of a family structure and why we have that need, as well as the unhealthy attitudes that our society has adopted towards families and what the consequences of those choices have been. For thousands and thousands of years, human beings have voluntarily organized themselves into family groups, and we have continued to do so because it works. Families aren't perfect by any means, and our families can often drive us crazy. But we still share a bond with them, and you dismiss your own evolutionary need for a family at your own peril. There are many people in positions of influence that frequently encourage people in today's world to cut their family members out of their lives altogether simply because they hold different opinions, vote differently, politically speaking, or for a variety of other trivial reasons. They encourage the people who listen to them to take the view that any difference between their own worldview and someone else's is an important affront being made against them, and to see it as a deliberate attack on who they are as a person. And of course, if someone rejects who you are at your core and attacks you, it is reasonable to choose to cut them out of your life going forward. The problem is that when someone disagrees with you and honestly sees things differently than you do, that isn't the same thing as them saying that they condemn or reject who you are as a person. And if they continue to have their own viewpoint and way of seeing things, if you fail to make a case that convinces them to change their mind, that isn't them attacking you. It's them having autonomy as a separate individual rather than simply being an extension of you, which would be more convenient, but is a narcissistic way of viewing other people. Unfortunately for the followers of these online advice givers who encourage them to constantly blur these lines in their thinking, acting on this bad advice is the surest way to end up alone. There is no one in the world that is going to agree with you on absolutely everything 100% of the time, not even you. The opinions you held 20 years ago are probably not all exactly the same as the opinions that you hold today. And the opinions that you will hold 20 years from now will probably have changed at least to some degree from the way you see things now. So, if that same difference in viewpoints when it comes from a friend or family member means that they should be cut out of your life, then you can't even be friends with different versions of yourself, much less with anyone else. Some people might try to argue that maybe that's still okay. Why do we really need anyone else anyway? Maybe we are all better off living mostly or even completely alone. First of all, that is not a very reasonable path to choose if the goal of life is to grow and learn and to evolve into something better and wiser. The solitary life being described is a life of guaranteed stagnation when it comes to both your maturity and your creativity, as well as the satisfaction that will come from challenging yourself and transforming into someone that is a better and more capable version of the person that you started out being. Secondly, how happy and content are the people that are living their lives that way, alone and isolated? Does it seem to have made the people who have tried it happy? Results matter more than theories do. In general, most of them come across as people who seem bitter, resentful, pessimistic, nihilistic, and as people that are usually growing more and more unstable by the day, both mentally and emotionally. There's probably a reason for that. Human beings weren't meant to thrive alone. Look at what happened to Tom Hanks in Castaway. He ended up arguing with a volleyball. And some people today seem to be about one social media post away from doing the same thing. Or take God's word for it when he said in the very first story in the Bible that, quote, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." One way or another, we all need a little outside help. So even if the theory of taking on life as some lone wolf appeals to you, and you find the idea of not needing anyone to be a romantic one, the results out in the real world are going mad and being devoured, which looks significantly less appealing in the realistic light of day. Lots of nice-sounding ideas have some very not-so-nice outcomes when attempted in the real world. That's why it's important not to get too attached to our ideas. That way you can discard them for your own sake whenever you discover that you need to. You should prioritize your quality of life over your ideas. Family units used to consist of much more healthy and robust structures than our modern concept of the nuclear family does. Mom, dad, and children is the bare bones version of how the family is supposed to function. The nuclear family works, but barely. It is really so much easier with the support of a village, even though being part of a village requires both effort and some sacrifices in exchange. Quote, "There are no solutions, only trade-offs," as Thomas Sowell correctly asserts. Families used to contain much more than most of them do now in the Western world. Siblings used to maintain their supportive bonds with each other, while also often continuing to annoy each other as well. But this provided the next generation with aunts and uncles, as well as the blessing of cousins. Cousins have most of the advantages of siblings, without the same frequency of disputes brought on by a more inescapable proximity to each other. Grandparents were also an active part of the family unit. They often ended up eventually living with the younger generations of the family at some point. This kind of multi-generational arrangement provided the children with more resources and family engagement, allowing them to thrive. As issues arose, it also provided the parents with the benefit of being able to turn for help and advice to someone who had more experience than they did, as well as having an extra pair of eyes and hands to take at least a bit of the pressure off of them. And it provided the grandparents with a purpose in their life that allowed them to keep their dignity as they aged. Rather than feeling old and useless and forgotten, they rightly felt that they still had a valuable contribution to make to the world and to the people who mattered the most to them, who would be shaped by them. This is a far superior setup to being shuffled off into a corner somewhere to age in misery, and then to die out of sight, neglected, and alone, with other lonely people who are in the same boat. Is that how you would want to spend the last years of your own life? Because that is the system we've built for ourselves. Were these close-knit, extended family structures all some sort of perfect Norman Rockwell painting in real life? Of course not. There were sacrifices that were made in order to have the benefits in exchange, and toes regularly got stepped on as part of the process. There were disputes and painful adjustments that often had to be made all around, but on the whole, Were the sacrifices worth the trade-offs that were made? Judging from the amount of dissatisfaction that most people seem to feel about their lives these days, I would have to say that the alternative, on the whole, was a better system than the one we have. It turns out that freedom, in the sense of living one's life only for oneself, doesn't lead to a life where one feels very free. Whereas freedom, in the sense of living one's life based on balancing, shouldering appropriate responsibilities and our obligations to each other, from which we derive our sense of value about ourselves, with the pursuit of our own interests and ambitions, as opposed to our transient and meaningless whims, that makes for a life that feels significantly more free than the alternative does. That reality is a bit of a paradox, I admit. But paradox or not, it remains the truth in terms of the results we find. This pattern of paradoxes extends to the idea of having children as well. No one denies that having children is a major sacrifice. Having kids means that life cannot be firstly about you and your wants anymore. Raising them, and especially raising them well, is a very time-consuming, difficult, and oftentimes bewildering, not to mention frustrating, process. We also know that doing this undeniably difficult thing is what most people end up feeling like was the most valuable thing that they ever did with their life, as well as the source of their greatest sense of meaning and joy. Children can be annoying, exhausting, infuriating, and even cruel. They can also be wonderful, open, loving, curious, and innocent little creatures that are so rejuvenating to be around that it borders on being magical. We used to be able to intrinsically understand that both of these realities were true at the same time. But only one of these messages is continuing to be spread at scale these days. People who don't have children openly resent the people who do, and they complain about them virtually nonstop. They even condemn them for it. They deeply dislike the children that they come into contact with and are irritated by the very idea of having them in the world. To be fair, part of that is because many parents are utterly failing to parent their kids and are creating little people that behave in ways that are truly intolerable. Some of that is because parents have no one to turn to who has actually been there and done this successfully, who could teach them how to do their job more successfully. After all, TikTok is not where anyone with any sense goes to get quality parenting advice. Another part of it is that parents are unwilling to take advice from the people who have done it successfully. They think they have nothing to offer, and that they already know it all. Some of it is because parents accept their own laziness and gratify their own desire for a detached lack of commitment toward participating in their child's life as parents. They just completely abdicate their responsibilities. They settle for inflicting their subpar results on the rest of the world, not to mention on their own children, and seem to dare anyone to criticize their lack of effort. But the problem goes far beyond these unhealthy and lazy parenting techniques. We are bombarded by messages that children are just annoying burdens, and only burdens. People simply do not go on social media to talk about the little thing that their child did that brought a smile to their face. Some little thing that would be hard to even put into words. They're too busy enjoying those things to post about them. But many people do post about their frustrations, complaints, and even regrets over having had children. Being able to vent and get some support and encouragement when you're going through a difficult moment is a good thing, but this has also become a self-reinforcing cycle where the only things that we are discussing regarding our children is the negative things that come along with being a parent. Naturally, we then begin to think about them in even more negative terms, and we begin collectively to only see the negative things about having children. You go back to your kids in that negative frame of mind and find even more things to frustrate you because that's what you're looking for. And the cycle just continues to spiral downward into an ever more pessimistic way of looking at what can be one of life's greatest blessings. Those who are viewing all of this from the outside, understandably, see all of this complaining and believe that they want nothing to do with such a terrible life. And yet, they often find themselves feeling unfulfilled in their own empty alternative choices. Many of them deal with this by posting videos where they attempt to convince themselves and others that their lives are wonderful. They talk about the meaningless things that they can afford to buy because they don't have kids to think about. They describe the places they get to go without making any memories worth remembering as the years go by. And they fantasize about all of the options that are still open to them without children, which they rarely or never end up being excited enough about to actually take advantage of doing them. But this cycle is self-reinforcing too. In this example, only the positive aspects are discussed and never any of the drawbacks of the loneliness, emptiness, or meaningless that can also result. So people who are feeling dissatisfied with their choice feel like it must just be them, and they keep their mouths shut out of loyalty to other people who participate in the same chosen lifestyle, and who all seem to be fulfilled by it. Meanwhile, those on the outside only see the glossy veneer of people who all claim to be happy and free, and so they follow their lead, especially when comparing that to all of the people who have kids and have nothing but complaints and regrets to offer. Again, it's about the results. What difference does it make if the picture looks shiny, if the results make you miserable? People's dissatisfaction with life is way up. Happiness is way down. Suicide and mental illness is way up. Are we supposed to believe that all of these results are merely a coincidence? One that is completely disconnected from the choices we've made? How can indulging in too much freedom ever be a bad thing? Maybe the answer is when it causes you to forfeit something better than freedom. Or perhaps the difference comes down to what freedom means theoretically and what actually produces the sensation of having freedom. Because many of the things that fall into the latter category often seem counterintuitive on the surface. But what is more important to you? The way something sounds or the results you get? All of these misconceptions and myths out there today when it comes to choosing to be a part of a family or not extend all the way to the root of the family, which is fundamentally a relationship between the two sexes. We have been told that complete freedom will equal achieving our greatest source of happiness. And nowhere have we been told this more than when it comes to our sexual freedom. Supposedly, the more free we are to do whatever we want to do, with whoever we theoretically want to do it with in each passing moment, the happier we will be. But once again, the results simply do not bear that out. People are more free today to be with anyone they want to be with, as casually as they want to be with them, with absolutely no societal judgment for any of it, than they have ever been before. And somehow, the result is that people are miserable, they feel terrible about themselves, and they suffer from all sorts of mental and emotional disorders. The birth rates have dropped well below replacement value, and many people that want to be in relationships are not able to successfully create them. How can that be? If people are more free than ever to engage in an endless variety of relationships, and they have access to more people to choose from than ever before via the internet and dating apps, as opposed to the limited options that they would have had in previous generations who were basically restricted to the people in their immediate vicinity, then how is it possible that we are failing to achieve the simple goal of being in the successful relationships that most people admittedly want in these supposedly utopian and idealistic environments? Konstantin Kisin recently joked about the phrase, "It's like getting pandas to mate." Breeding pandas successfully is notoriously difficult compared to most other species. Yet the average female panda will still have 5 or 6 cubs in her lifetime. The average Western female will have only 1.5 children. We are literally going extinct faster than the pandas are. Why? Thomas Sowell was correct yet again when he said that, quote, "Much of the social history of the Western world over the past 3 decades has involved replacing what worked with what sounded good," end quote. Once again, being theoretically free to do whatever you want with whoever you want in any context in which you choose to engage has produced a sense of feeling trapped rather than feeling free. You can choose to prioritize life's theories, or you can choose to prioritize their results and how they affect your life. But one of those things has to take priority over the other. So the question is, would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy? Are you willing to live a life that makes you miserable in order to back an ideology that appeals to you and to be a loyal supporter of the cause? Or does the quality of your own day-to-day life matter more to you than being a good soldier does? And once you've answered that question, answer this one. Does the quality of your day-to-day life matter to you enough for you to forget your obligatory loyalty to some cause in order to choose what is best for you, even if it goes against the grain and results in your getting criticized for that? Women have been lied to when it comes to these issues, perhaps more than anyone else. I know that I'm supposed to feel some sort of loyalty to the sisterhood, but I'm sorry, I just don't. My life is more valuable to me than the cause is. You are completely free to reverse those priorities in your own life, but you will not get me to reverse them in mine. With that said, women have been lied to more than anyone else when it comes to these issues, and they have been lied to primarily by other women. I know that it's more fun to blame the patriarchy for everything, but women are grown-ups too, and they have to be responsible for their own decisions like big girls, because they have free will just like everyone else. The sexual revolution was supposed to free women more than anyone else. After all, men were already mostly free to indulge in their sexual instincts, as long as they kept it within reasonable bounds and were appropriately discreet about it. They never faced the same degree of judgment that women did for violating societal expectations when it came to sex, but it simply was and is a lie to claim that women are exactly like men in the first place. We're not. I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but we are wired differently than men are, and left to our own devices without indoctrination to the contrary, most women prioritize things differently than a hormonal young male of the species does. And I don't understand why we're supposed to feel obligated to perform like good little feminists by pretending to want things that we don't actually want in order to be considered acceptable by other women. The real misogyny is from those who think that women, as women, have no real value. So these female misogynists think that they can and should control other women, tell them what to want, and try to make them be more like men, because only masculine women have value in their eyes. I know the feminists are all clutching their pearls right now and grinding their teeth and screwing up their faces into the appropriate expressions of their disapproval at these too true accusations. But once they unclench, they'll live. I'm not telling anyone else how they have to live their own life. They can do exactly what they want to do, and they will. But so will I. They are allowed to go on making their case, which will go on convincing some people to follow their example. And I am allowed to point to the things that they say that are misleading, not to mention insulting, and to point out the potential consequences of following their precious pet theories. The chips will fall where they may. Each person will have to decide for themselves what makes sense to them and how much of their own happiness they are willing to risk. But if the idea is that I am supposed to remain silent so that no one questions how someone else in an ideological ivory tower wants them to live their life, then I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be doing what you want me to do. And the chips can fall where they may on that too. The idea that most women are going to find happiness or feel good about themselves and valuable as human beings by indulging in every fleeting desire that they feel for a moment with no thought given to whether it will be worth it to them in the long run or not is just not true. Most women do not want to spend their entire life having casual sex with strangers and never having anything more meaningful than that. Anyone who has ever met women knows that for the majority of them, I'm right about that. And the idea that having a lot of casual sex with lots of different people is the way to find a serious relationship with one person makes no sense right on its face. You become what you practice. We all do. I didn't make the rules, but I can observe the realities. And I'm just sharing my observations with whoever is interested in my thoughts on the subject. The sad reality is that if you treat yourself like a piece of meat and invite others to do the same thing, then you will end up feeling like a piece of meat and being victimized by the sociopaths who will take you up on your offer and use you accordingly. And you are not going to feel good about yourself afterwards. You're just not. You get what you're looking for. Sociopaths. The only men who are looking for one-night stands instead of real relationships are users, manipulators, and narcissists. If you think you are going to find a high-quality man by fishing in that cesspool, then to quote Tom MacDonald, that's like sleeping with the football team to try to be a virgin. But women today seem to feel an insane level of obligation to stuff down their own unhappiness and their own negative feelings about their self-worth in order to play along and put on the approved performance that society wants from them. They do this partly because they believe the same performance put on by other women. And they believe that the way that they are feeling about their experience is some strange anomaly, one that they should feel ashamed of and try to hide successfully and suppress in order to not be rejected as being wildly different from everyone else. They also do it because, sadly, they falsely believe that this is as good as life gets. If they are feeling miserable with all of this freedom, then how much more miserable will they be if they end up being even less free than they are right now because they gave up some of their freedom? Out of fear of the unknown and a fear of being judged and rejected, they cling to the very shackles that are preventing them from having what they actually want deep down. And for the most part, the people who are standing in the way of women being able to talk honestly with each other about what they want are other women. Take Cardi B, for example. I'm just going to say it. Her song, WAP, is disgusting. I don't mean it's vulgar and offensive, even though it is both of those things too. I mean it's gross. Like, triggers your gag reflex gross. She writhes around like a professional in a way that if her video had been a man's idea, it would be condemned as Harvey Weinstein level exploitation of women. But somehow it's okay for a woman to exploit a woman, and it's even celebrated as female empowerment. Encouraging girls to sell their bodies for tuition money is exploiting them, whether it's being done by a man or by a woman. I refuse to indulge in these double standards just because someone else thinks I'm obligated to support everything that someone with an XX chromosome does. That video wasn't female empowerment, and y'all know it. You know how I know you know it? Because none of you set your daughters down and said to them, "Here, sweetie, watch this. This is how you should behave around the boys tomorrow at school. This is what an empowered woman looks like. You do this and they'll respect you as a female." None of you set your sons down either and said, "Here, Timmy, this is how you should think of and treat women. This is what an empowered woman is. When you think of a woman's value, picture this." Not one of you did that. So can we stop playing games and pretending to be offended when someone points out that the Empress has no clothes? I've met women who say things all the time that I know they don't actually mean. And the weirdest part is that they repeat these things frequently without ever appearing to stop and question if they actually feel that way. But they go on saying it. It's very strange. They will say that they wish they were a man, even though they would not actually make that choice if they could. They will say that they wish they were a lesbian, even if they're deeply attracted to men and enjoy being heterosexual. They will say that they are proud of sleeping around and that it has been so much fun for them, even though they wouldn't actually feel the need to express feeling a sense of pride in that choice if it weren't for a default reaction to feeling the exact opposite way. And despite all of the fun that they claim to have had, they admit to being very unhappy in their day-to-day lives. It is a very strange cycle of self-denialism that women as a whole have fallen prey to and continue to inflict on each other. And most of them seem determined to continue doing this to other women, even if it does make them all miserable in the process. I'll give an example of a woman's determination to persist in doing what she clearly does not feel good about. Normally, I wouldn't have even known about a story like this, but it's being talked about a lot on the internet, and I think it's worth looking at in this light. There's a young girl who looks to be in her early 20s on OnlyFans, who recently got a lot of attention for succeeding in her self-imposed challenge to have sex with 100 men in 24 hours. And absolutely everyone who knows about this story has an opinion about it. OnlyFans and the women who participate in it lie to other women by telling them that this is an easy way to make extra money with no strings attached. The only problem with prostituting yourself for money in the traditional way, they claim, is the pimp who controls you. By removing that middleman and pimping yourself out instead, they claim that you'll always be in control of where things go. That is partially true, but only partially and only conditionally. The implication is that being in control of your actions is the same thing as being in control of where they will take you. And that part is a lie. It turns out that most women who get involved in a life of pornography end up feeling and being trapped by the stigma associated with that choice. And that trap is just as powerful when it's made by you as it is when someone else sets it. This young woman clearly demonstrated that. When asked about achieving her goal afterwards, she appeared to be what can only be described as broken. She couldn't hold back the tears as she said that she kind of felt like a prostitute, which, given that a prostitute has sex with strangers in exchange for financial gains, then I'm sure that having sex with 100 strangers in order to sell subscriptions would make you feel exactly like a prostitute. That result shouldn't really be that big of a surprise to anyone. Many people, including myself, felt very sorry for this young woman and for what she had done to herself. Many people felt that the damage done to her was the result of exploitation, and I agree with them for the most part. But who exploited her? Herself, for one. Her mother, who manages her career, even more so. OnlyFans obviously exploited her. After all, it's what they do to all of the women who buy their lies and end up in places where they never intended or wanted to go. But who else exploited this girl? Some people argue that the men who participated in this 100-man challenge exploited her. The furthest I'm willing to go is to say that, like her, they exploited each other and themselves. But I don't know how you can argue that they exploited her any more than she exploited them, given that this was her idea, which she willingly and consensually engaged in every step of the way. But I have yet to hear anyone point to perhaps the biggest exploiters of all in this tragic case. Themselves. If you subscribe to OnlyFans, or help spread the lie that going down this road will never mean finding yourself in a position that you profoundly regret and feel trapped by, one that will leave you damaged, then you helped to lie to this young woman and exploited the naivete of her youth, which got her here. And many of those yous that I'm talking to right now are other women, especially the other women who are themselves on OnlyFans. It is women whose misplaced loyalty causes them to continue to perpetuate this lie that they actually feel good about themselves while doing these things. They clearly do not. And the few who do are predators and sociopaths. But both groups seem to convince a lot of young people to destroy their own lives as well. Young people lack the discernment to distinguish between a sincere display and an obligatory performance that is made in order to save face, because your pride won't allow you to just say that you made a bad decision, as we all have at some point. I don't judge you for that, but I do judge you for sacrificing more young women to this unhappiness that you have experienced and know that they will suffer under just to spare your own pride. That is monstrous, to value another human being less than you do your own feelings. And I also judge the women who have led the way for all of this by putting their cause above the truth. The women who called Cardi B's WAP female empowerment in front of the young women who look up to them because they don't know any better. Shame on every one of you, and you know who you are. As I said, this young woman on OnlyFans is a perfect example of putting on the performance that she is expected to put on for the sake of the cause. Even standing there, broken and in tears, there was no thought of not continuing down the very path that had brought her to this moment. With her next breath, she talked about attempting to take on a new challenge by having sex with 1,000 men in 24 hours the next time, so that she could set a world record. At this point, she probably feels so broken and trapped that even trying to take another path seems like pure wishful thinking to her. The truth is that although it would be difficult, and there would always be people out there that would judge her for her past, most people wouldn't. And it is absolutely not too late to stop doing this to yourself. You are actually worth more than you and the people around you are selling yourself for. And you don't have to keep attaching a dollar sign to your worth as a human being, no matter how things seem or what anyone else tells you. You can still have a life that is worth living, and I hope one day you will believe that and act on it. And speaking of judging, this is a concept that plays into all of this too. We are living in a world that, through what may have started out as good intentions, has reached a point now that is bordering on dystopian. In Aldous Huxley's novel, Brave New World, it is considered unforgivably rude to refuse to have sex with anyone who wants to have sex with you. What right do you have to refuse? Do you believe that you are better than them? You don't believe in equality? We are honestly starting to border on that as a society right now, at least as far as our perceptions go, even if that does not yet fully apply to our actions. After all, to reject anyone is essentially being inherently judgy. Yes! Right! Good! You should be judgy when it comes to valuing yourself as a person. If we've reached a point where the things that once went without saying now need to be said, then fine, I'll say them. You are not a piece of meat. You should not make yourself available to anyone who is willing to pay for you in order to be fair, as though you are just a piece of meat in a marketplace. You are more than that. And it is okay to know that you are more than that. I know many women who don't want to be thought of as judgy when it comes to the men that they choose to get involved with. But that is one of the places where it is actually good to be judgy. It is okay to say that a man has to have his shit together in order to be good enough for you. And it is okay for him to say that you have to have your shit together in order for you to be good enough to be with him. There is nothing wrong with having standards. That is part of valuing yourself appropriately. Arrogance is only when you value yourself disproportionately. So don't do that. But value yourself as you should. Someone else's feelings are not your job. It's good to care about people and their feelings, but it is not good to take those on as though keeping them balanced is somehow your responsibility in life. Their feelings are their responsibility. You don't owe them you in order to spare their feelings. It's okay to value yourself too much to treat yourself like a cookie that you give away in order to make someone else who is broken feel better, or in order to avoid making them feel bad. The fact that we live in a world that is attempting to shame straight men for not being willing to sleep with other men who are trans and identify as women because it will hurt that trans person's feelings not to be treated as a woman is insane. No one is obligated to sleep with anyone for any reason. And the only people who need to be publicly shamed right now are those who are trying to shame others into having obligatory pity sex in order to not offend their political worldview. Who do people think they are to even try and push that on others? The rest of us have reached a point where we are willing to say, no, I do get to reject people and decide who I want to be with, judgy or not. And we all actually should be judgy when it comes to deciding who will make you happy. If a woman meets a man who is contributing nothing to those around him, who has no ambitions or goals, is unwilling to take on any real responsibilities, who engages in criminal activities, is addicted to drugs, cheats on you, lies to you, and is verbally abusive to you when he's upset, then it is okay to say, that's not good enough for me. I realize that we now live in a world where you are never supposed to say that anyone is not good enough, but that doesn't make it any less true. Judging them in the sense of saying that you have some basic standards and what they are offering you does not meet those standards is not the same thing as saying that they have less moral worth than you do as a human being. Is it the same as you saying that you're better than they are? As in worth more? Well, they're a human being too, and all life is sacred, so no, not in that sense. But in the sense of, are you bringing more to the table than they are? Well, if they're the guy that I just described, then yeah, probably. It would be hard not to be. That's not judgy. That's the reality. And if you say that you want someone who brings the same amount to the table as you do and won't settle for less, that's not being judgy either. You're looking for a partner, right? You don't want to be in it alone with a man-child that you have to play mommy to. That's not a relationship. That's being a single parent. Likewise, if a good man is looking for a woman who can be a partner to him so that he can build a family with her, etc., and he sees a woman who isn't faithful, who likes to party and do drugs, who isn't responsible or reliable, who doesn't value herself and is on OnlyFans, does he have the right to say, that's not what I'm looking for? Of course he does. That's not being judgy. That's being honest enough to not waste everyone's time with something that is clearly not a good fit from the start and will therefore never make either of them happy. It's never fun to be on the receiving end of that kind of honesty, but for the most part, it's only the people who get their feelings hurt by other people having standards who consider having standards to be being judgy. But once again, judging in the sense of correctly valuing yourself and having basic standards for what is and what isn't going to contribute positive things to your life is an entirely good thing. Lacking those standards and or honesty about them will not lead you to a life where you just luck into a high-quality relationship or future. If you set a low bar, the world is not going to raise it for you just to be nice. You should be judgy about who is worth spending the finite amount of time that you have in your one and only life with. If you're not judgy in that sense, then you will waste your life on a lot of things and people that only lead you further away from the life that you actually want to have. And it will be over before you know it. Being judgy is the first step to forming a family. You are making the judgment that this person is more capable of making you happy and better suited to building the life you're aiming for than the person who is standing next to them is. And if you truly love that person, which is more than just the fuzzy feeling that is associated with being in love, then you will want to be a person who is enhancing their life as much as they enhance yours. Mixing up love itself with the feeling that is associated with it has been the source of a lot of confusion for a lot of young people. Loving someone is a choice, not a feeling. Attraction is a feeling and a necessary part of love, but it is not love itself. The warm, fuzzy feeling that makes you feel good inside is often a result of loving someone, but it is not love itself either. You can have that same feeling without being in love. Love is a choice. It is choosing to prioritize what is best for the person that you love above what you want for yourself, which is exactly how refusing to enable an addict is the loving thing to do. It doesn't make them happy when you won't enable their addiction. It doesn't make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, often quite the opposite. But it is the loving thing to do, because that is loving them enough to want what is best for them, even if it is difficult for you. Love is choosing to live that way, relationally prioritizing someone else's well-being. It is valuing them enough to make the appropriate sacrifices in order to be the person that the best version of them deserves to have in their life. That is what makes real love strong enough to mean something and to last. That is what makes it valuable enough to be worth seeking it out and building a life on it. That is also what makes it so incredibly hard to find and to maintain. It's all well and good to say that you want to find love. But do you want it enough to do that in order to have it? To live every day that way? Because if you don't, that's fine. But it isn't going to just fall into your lap for anything less than all you have to give. Christopher Hitchens advised us that, quote, "In life we must choose our regrets." So, which regrets can you live with? The answer to that is going to vary from one person to the next. But we have to start by being honest with ourselves instead of continuing to be loyal to the trendy ideologies that have personally failed us so far. Are you going to regret not going to bed with that really hot guy more than you're going to regret feeling like an object who meant nothing to him during the next few months that follow? And the argument against that is always going to be, what if he doesn't treat me like an object and walk away the next morning? Well, aside from the whole fishing for a good man in the pool of sociopaths argument, which we already covered, one really good way to assess the likelihood of that possibility beforehand is to see how he handles hearing the word no. Because at some point in your relationship, he is going to hear that word from you, and then what? You might as well start off by finding out how he handles things when they don't go his way. It's better than wasting everyone's time with something that will never work and adding another regret to a growing pile of one-night stands that you have to carry around with you. We have to choose which regrets we can live with carrying around that way. At the end of your life, can you live with the regret of having lived isolated and alone more than you can live with the sacrifice of having to compromise in order to have healthy relationships with other people? Can you live with not being a parent and not having that fundamentally human experience with a sense of having left behind a legacy that will continue on after you are gone, more than you can live with the sacrifices and complicated struggles of trying to raise your children well through the first couple of decades of their life? Can you live with cutting off your family and friends and trying to sustain yourself on only yourself in order to avoid any unpleasant differences in views, more than you can live with learning how to negotiate those differences in a healthy way in order to take the good with the bad? Can you live with walking away from a toxic relationship or one that is not improving your life, more than you can live with settling for that and only that. These are the fundamental questions of everyone's life. And it's time people started giving themselves permission to start asking these questions again. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please like and follow, because that's what causes podcasts to be successful or not. And either way, I hope you come back next week for part 3 of this series. Until then, have a good week, my friends.